I'm walking up this lonely hillside because this is the way to Stanydale Temple. Stany, I presume, has to do with stones, so it's a valley of the stones. But in fact, it was fertile agricultural land, and there's a path leading half a mile off the main road down to the temple, which may have been a temple, or a hall for religious gatherings, or just a hall for having a mead feast. But it's surrounded by several other buildings, as we'll see when we get there. The path leads up over the hillside in a rather deserted spot in Shetland. There's only one single house visible in the distance. The path underfoot is soggy and damp, but it's not muddy. It's peat, covered in grass. And the way we should follow is marked by these black and white poles. I don't know whether you can see them heading off into the distance. We've about half a mile to go to Stanydale Temple. Well, this is certainly no path for high heels and ballet shoes. Not only the peat, but thick patches of sphagnum moss into which your feet sink. It's certainly one for hiking boots. Along the way, we pass the remains of a house, a stone-built house with thick walls that are better to keep out the weather. Not terribly big, but then they didn't expect 3-bedroom houses in those days. This would have been a farmhouse where the farmer and his family lived while they tended their fields and their cattle. Nearby are these two standing stones. Are they much shorter than they were originally? And what was their purpose? Doorways into a house? Guardians of the pathway? Or simply field markers? The building behind me is called the Temple simply because of its similarity to Neolithic temples on Malta. But some of the features of the building do tend towards that interpretation. For example, the most finely worked and smooth stones are on the inside rather than the outside. 3 fire pits were found. 3 seems a bit odd for a house. Each one was in front of an alcove. And they were quite tidy, unlike the sort of fireplaces that you might find in a home. And then they found the bones of sheep and other sacrificial animals here associated with the fires. So it seems likely that the building was used, at least at times, for ritual purposes. There's one alcove. There's the central alcove, and there's the alcove on the left. There are 2 of these holes, one here and one over here. And it's believed that they were post holes in which larch tree trunks were placed for holding up the roof. Which brings us to an interesting point. There are no large stones in the vicinity of this temple, so they would have had to be brought from quite some distance. And larch timber does not grow on Shetlands. It was either imported from Scandinavia or was driftwood carried up laboriously from the beach. Obviously, a lot of work went into making this temple, far more than would be expected for an ordinary domestic building. I don't know whether you can make it out, but the front of the building is just ever so slightly dished. It's not a straight line. And I'm sure that was done deliberately for decorative effect, to make it more impressive in some way. We don't know what the mind of the builders was, but clearly a lot of thought and planning went into this temple. Why did they go to all this trouble? They knew far more than we in the 21st century know that their lives were not under their control. Drought and flood, heat and cold These were things which could affect their lives and over which they had no influence or control. And so they built a temple in order to propitiate the gods, the forces of nature as they understood them. And we would do well to similarly remember God, for our lives are not under our control. An accident that takes but a moment can affect us for the rest of our lives. And we need the aid of a supernatural power to help us through our lives. Or, of course, to give us hope when all seems hopeless, when everything we have tried has failed, and when perhaps we are facing the last great enemy. A hope for a life eternal can be very comforting for ourselves and for those who remain behind after we have gone.